All right, everybody, hello and welcome back to another video. Today, I am going over contenders, teams, and players who have a shot, in my opinion, of finding their way into the Overwatch League. I want to focus on a lot of these good contenders teams, a lot of the teams that we saw playing in the Contenders Gauntlet just a couple, I guess it was last weekend. So there's a lot of players that obviously participated, number of teams that participated, so I want to focus on the teams that I think will have a good chance at seeing players added to the Overwatch League. We're going to start, of course, with the team that won the whole thing. That is Element Mystic. Element Mystic is a very, very, very good team. They had a number of players from their 2018 team make it into the Overwatch League. They have a bunch of really good players that you cannot sleep on, right? From their 2018 team, right, they had Guard, Jexa, Pokepo, Dako, and Repel all making the Overwatch League. Very good number of players there that you need to look at. This is a team, the player to watch 100% is Sparkle. He is the one that everybody is talking about. He is a very good player. He is currently only 17, but he will turn 18 in May, which means that he is eligible for the second half of the season. So he's the kind of player that a team will try to sign, have him play on their contenders roster for a little bit, and then bring them up. The other big thing is their head coach Rush, who is another player that a coach that a lot of people I think are going to be looking at a lot. This is a team that has a lot of really good players on it. You would be definitely missing out if you didn't sign any of these players. They're definitely players to look at. They're 100% solid players. I would expect, from what I've heard, based on stuff I've seen online, the entirety of the Element Mystic roster has been offered Overwatch League contracts. Not as like a group. There hasn't been like a Vancouver Titans that said, we want you as a team to join our organization. It was more like, this player got an offer, this player got an offer. So they're a team to definitely watch out for. A team like Florida Mayhem, I think, is a team that would definitely go after Element Mystic players. Washington Justice, London, if these rumors are true about them trading a bunch of players, that's something I would expect. New York Excelsior have a couple holes that they need to fill. So teams that have these all-Korean rosters will probably look to Element Mystic as one of their places to go to replace those players. So that is what I expect from Element Mystic. Number 2 overall team from the Gauntlet was Atlanta Academy. Now, Atlanta Academy is a very interesting team because they have a lot of players who never actually played much in the Overwatch League, who are on Overwatch League contracts. You have Kodak, who then, of course, went from Atlanta Reign, just dropped down to Atlanta Academy. You have Funny Astro and Gator, who are both on two-way contracts. Gator, of course, played a decent amount in the playoffs, but Funny Astro, I don't believe, ever actually played during the season. So they have a lot of players who are under contract for the Atlanta Academy, who are on the Atlanta Academy, who aren't necessarily able to play. You have Sugarfree and Saucy, who are their DPS duo. Both of them are too young to play. Sugarfree is not going to be old enough to play for a while because he's only 14. He is someone who's very solid, but it's going to take a while for him to get signed to any Overwatch League team, and who knows if he ever will be. The game, he may not play in 4 years. Then you have Hawk and Perfect. The DPS is Perfect. Hawk is their off tank. He could get signed to a team that needs one. But I think Atlanta Academy is going to try to stick together as much as they can. Perfect is another player that isn't old enough to play, and his birthday is not until August. So I don't think he's eligible for the next season. So in reality, Atlanta Academy is a team I don't expect to change a whole lot. I expect them to stay mostly the same, with maybe one or two players leaving. But for the most part, I don't think they will switch over to a the Overwatch League. I think most of the players are going to stay with the team. Number 3 overall seed in the Gauntlet was Runaway. Runaway were the champions of the 2019 Season 2 for Korean Contenders. They are a team who pretty much every single player on this team, once again, just like Element Mystic, expect them to get Overwatch League contracts, assuming they are old enough to get them. Unless there's players that aren't old enough, I would expect them to have contracts just like the Vancouver Titans were. This is a team where I would expect a lot of people will try to go after this team. They showed how Runaway is a very top tier organization. Vancouver Titans came from them. They're a very good team. And they, of course, are going to have connections to the Vancouver Titans. So if the Vancouver Titans have any positions that they feel like they need to fill, they're going to turn immediately to Runaway and say, okay, Runaway, can we sign this player? And a lot of those players are probably going to look to join a team that is the Vancouver Titans, who has a bunch of history with Runaway, because they probably know them. So definitely something I would say is very possible and potentially could happen. Of course, their coach at Runaway is Kuki, of course, who recently played for the LA Valiant, but also played for the Seoul Dynasty. That's a really, really, really good player, coach. He's not a player anymore; he's just a coach. But that's a solid coach, and I think he could definitely be a scary player to watch, a scary coach to watch. He could end up as maybe not a head coach or somebody, but I think he'll stay with Runaway. But he could end up at some point in time as a coach of some sort. But he's a really, really, really good coach to definitely watch out for. The number 4 overall team is where you start getting interesting, because I guess it was Gen G, because they lost in the losers round 3. Gen G, of course, is the Seoul Dynasty's academy team, basically. And they have some good players. They have Woo Hyul, of course, who was formerly in the Overwatch League. Wakid was formerly in the Overwatch League. So they have some former Overwatch League talent. They have a lot of players. This is another team that I would expect people to look at. The Seoul Dynasty could maybe look at that, but they look like they're going purely on trying to get Overwatch League players. So who knows? But this is another team to watch out for. Any team from Korea, let's be honest. Any team from Korea is a team to watch out for. O2 Blast, Meta Athena, Fusion University is a really good team to look at, especially if you're a team like the Philadelphia Fusion, who have a need, I think, for signing some players from their academy team or just from other places. World Game Star, GC Busan Wave. These are all teams to definitely watch for, and potentially we will see some of those teams sign or get players signed to the Overwatch League. But those are the teams I would say to watch out of all of them, because I think they are the most likely teams to have major signings for the Overwatch League in the future. But I want to focus a lot more on like the teams from the Gauntlet, because I think they're the teams that have been the best of the best, so you'd expect to see them a lot more. But Gen G is a very good team. They're a very solid team. I would expect players like Glister and Stalker and Woo Hyul and Wakid to be potentially Overwatch League players. Glister is not currently 18. He turns 18 in January, so it's not an issue. He'll be ready by the start of the season. Woo Hyul, of course, is a tank player. He played with London. He played with XL2 Academy, and then he went to Gen G. So he has some pretty good history, I guess. He's been on some decent teams. I mean, he wasn't on the best XL2 teams, but he was on a pretty good teams. So he's definitely a player to watch out for as well, getting into the Overwatch League. Stalker has been one of the players I've seen a lot of. The problem with Stalker is, of course, he's too young. So he's a player to watch out for, potentially joining another academy team. But he's only 16. He won't be 18 for another 2 years. So, that's where you run into the issue of players that you may or may not see. And then Wakid, of course, is the other one who formerly in the Overwatch League could make his way back into the Overwatch League, but we don't know. But that's Gen G. Those are my thoughts on Gen G. I think Gen G is a team just to watch. They have some players who definitely could make their way, but there's no guarantee with them. Now we get into some of the more interesting teams for the Talon Esports is what I want to talk about next, because Talon Esports were one of the most intriguing teams throughout the entirety of the Gauntlet. For those who don't know, Talon Esports is a team from the Pacific region of Contenders, which is not a great region in Contenders. They're a Hong Kong organization, and they're not actually all that great overall as a region. But the Talon Esports organization has actually been pretty good, and they were very impressive during the Gauntlet. You know, they're a team from a region that doesn't normally do very well. It doesn't normally gain a lot of traction, and they managed to make it pretty farther than a lot of people expected them to before they lost to Gen G, which is, I mean, Gen G is a very good team. No one expected them to beat Gen G, but it was a close series against Gen G. It was a 3-2 series. It was a very close match. You know, they 3-0'd Gladiators Legion. They beat XL2 3-2. They beat HSL 3-0. I mean, they had some good results in the Gauntlet. They're a team to watch out for. You know, a team like Boston Uprising has you know, Persia, who's on the Boston Uprising, came from Talon. So this is a really interesting team to watch. Gagora in particular is, I think, the interesting one to watch. He is a Korean off-tank player. You know, they have some other, you know, they have CQB and Patafan and Mangajai, who are from, CQB is from Taiwan, Patafan is from Thailand, and Mangajai is from Hong Kong. Patafan's another one to watch. That could be interesting on a mixed nationality roster. The problem is he's only 16, and his birthday is in September, so he could once again be a player that a Contenders team signs to their roster, but he isn't old enough yet to play in the Overwatch League, so it'll be interesting to see if he sticks with Talon or if he goes on to some other Contenders team. But Gogora is an interesting one. He's 21 years old. He's a flex tank player, and he looked pretty good throughout the Gauntlet. He's the type of player that I could see going to a team that really needs a flex tank, like an NYXL or even a Houston Outlaws if they wanted to go that route. He's a very good player. He's the kind of player I would potentially, or I could see doing something like that. Don't know if they will, but he's the player I think that deserves the most attention from Talon, because Patafan's too young. But they have some other players too that we could see potentially make it into the Overwatch League. Also, their head coach could definitely make it into the Overwatch League. He's another one that I think is important to watch, because you look at what he's done with this organization, very possible. So that's Arachne or something. I don't know how you pronounce it. He's definitely someone who could make their way into the Overwatch League as a head coach, just because of what he's done and how good he has been. He's from South Korea, so he could coach a Korean team that needs a coach. Very good player in Gagora, very good coach. This is an organization that I think could produce some Overwatch League players and some Overwatch League coaches. Definitely one to watch. The next team is XL2 Academy. And XL2 Academy is definitely an interesting one. Obviously, they are the NYXL Academy team. The thing with them, as opposed to NYXL, is that they have a mostly Western roster. They have Speedily, Buds, Gig, and OG, all from NA, or all from the US in particular. KSP is from Europe, and he's from the UK. And then you have Haku and Bianca. Haku is Japanese-American, so he represents Japan, but he's also, you know, a US player at the same time. And he's going to be on the Japanese World Cup team, for example. But then the other player is Bianca, who is a flex tank from Korea. Now, This is an interesting one because obviously he's on XL2, and he went to XL2 at the beginning of the 2019 Contenders season. He's 17, but he turns 18 in January, so he will be eligible for the Overwatch League for next season. Once again, potentially a player that a team like NYXL might go after because he's on their academy team. He's the kind of player that they are knowledgeable of. They are aware of his skills, and they had him on his Contenders team, or had him on their Contenders team for a reason. Definitely a player to look out for if you are an NYXL fan, and you are wondering who maybe NYXL could add as a replacement for Meko, because Meko is, of course, no longer with the organization. Bianca is one of the players to watch. There's a lot of flex tanks from Contenders that are Korean players that I think definitely are players that are expected to be signed. I think you can add Bianca. I don't think Bianca's gonna be an upgrade over Meko. And I think if they had it their way, they would get an upgrade over Meko. I think they would like to try to get a player like Fury from London Spitfire if they could. But there's no real guarantee that happens. Bianca's a very good player for them to go after. I think they are going to do what they can to sign him. I think that they want him potentially, even if he's just a backup. I wouldn't be surprised if they tried to bump him up. The XL2 Academy is an interesting team. They were never super impressive throughout the 2019 season, but their 2019 season 2 was pretty good. They got second overall in NA East, I believe. One of the NA regions. I don't remember which one. Yeah. No. NA West. They got second overall in NA West. So it's a good look for them. They're a team that's interesting to watch. I don't know if they're going to have many players enter the Overwatch League. I don't expect them to. They've had some players in the past that have made it into the Overwatch League. They had Logix for a while. They had Mangachu. They had Woohyal. They had Tizzy. They had Nene. They had Flower. So New York has shown a history of moving players up from Contenders, from XL2 onto their main roster. So they could with some of these players, but I don't know if any would be Bianca. He's the only one I would see them moving up because they're an all-Korean team. Bianca's the only Korean player in XL2, so that'll be what we need to watch out for. Another interesting player, of course, is KSP. He's a UK player. He could end up on a team like Paris, though I don't expect him to, or he could end up on a team like Boston, whereas Fusions is their main tank. He could be another British DPS player, or just British player on the roster in general. Interesting player, but I don't expect much from him. All right, so we have 4 teams left. I want to talk next about Team Envy, the team that won NA West for Contenders. And Team Envy is certainly a team that will likely produce some players for the Overwatch League. You have Half-a-Cool, Numlocked. Numlocked is an interesting one. I've kind of thought of Numlocked as potentially a player that the Paris Eternal might want to go after for their main tank. And if they want to go for a flex tank, they could always go for Half-a-Cool, or if the Dallas Fuel need a flex tank. They're 2 players that I think actually could definitely be decent for like European tanks. There's a lot of other, it's a pretty solid roster in general. If you're building like an NA team or just like a mixed team in general, any kind of Western roster or mixed roster, this is a team that I think is not a bad team to look at to potentially get players. You look at they formerly had McGravy, formerly had Trill and Lulsish and Elivote, players who moved up into the Overwatch League, and then of course they had the entire roster that ended up as the Dallas Fuel with Taimu, Harry Hook, Coco, Chip Sayan, Mickey Effect, and Seagull. Lots of really solid and strong players that have ended up in different areas over time. The Team Envy is the Dallas Fuel Academy team. Team Envy, of course, is the original team Team Envy's been around for a long time, but then they became the Dallas Fuel for the Overwatch League, and then they became Team Envy as an academy team. So they're a team to watch. I don't expect them to be super strong if they join the Overwatch League. I expect them to be pretty good players, but I don't expect them to be superstar players. But I would expect at least one or two of these players to find a way into the Overwatch League. I wouldn't be surprised. All right, last NA team is Gladiators Legion. Now, Gladiators Legion are pretty good, but I don't think they are incredible. Panker was on the two-way contract with the Gladiators, and he never found playtime in the Overwatch League. I also don't think he played during the Gauntlet at all. But this is a team that has had some players make it into the Overwatch League. Blase, Corey, Gods, Fried, all of them made their way into the Overwatch League at one point or another. So they have some players that could. Panker, I guess, could, for a team that needs a main tank. You got Water, who's a pretty well-known player. Pretty entertaining guy. He could definitely find a way into the Overwatch League. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. We don't know. We have no way to really tell. But it's possible that he could, but we don't really know. Stand One is another player who's pretty popular, pretty well known. I've seen a lot from him over time. He was with Envy for a little while. He was with NRG. Went to Gladiators Legion, so he's been around a while. He's definitely a player that could definitely find his way to the Overwatch League as well. But other than that, I don't expect many Gladiators Legion players to make it in the Overwatch League. And I know someone's going to be like, but XQC's on the Gladiators Legion. He's not really on the team, though. He's really only there so that he can stay in the US. I'm pretty sure. I don't think he will ever actually play a game for Gladiators Legion. He's just there as kind of a joke. But anyway, Gladiators Legion is an interesting team. I don't expect a ton of signings from them, but I guess a couple are possible here and there. Maybe even the Gladiators could sign one or two. The Gladiators do need a main tank. They lost Roar, so I guess Panker is a potential option there for them to bring up. And Stand One is a potential player for them to bring up. Who knows? I guess it's not out of the picture for them to bring up some of these players potentially, but you know, we don't know yet, and we don't know if they're going to even have Void either. So they might need to bring up a good number of players since they don't have a lot under under contract right now. So we'll see what happens with the Gladiators and Gladiators Legion. But that might be a team that Gladiators have to go after some of their academy players. The last two teams are interesting ones. It's HSL from EU and LGE Huya, or Lingan Esports and Huya from China. I want to start with LGE Huya because I don't really expect LGE Huya to have a lot of players making the Overwatch League. It's only because their players are mostly Chinese. Well, some of them are Chinese. They have 3 Korean players as well. They're connected to the Chengdu Hunters, so they have a chance, of course, to potentially have players go from their team to the Chengdu Hunters, but the Chengdu Hunters' entire roster is under contract, so I don't expect that to happen. So I don't think that'll be the case. And they have some Korean players, but I don't think they're that impressive, and I think you're going to go for... And if you have a team like the Hangzhou Spark or the Guangzhou Charge, where you have players who are both Korean and Chinese, and you need people who can speak a common language, whether that be English or whatever, then that is a team definitely to look at, because they have players that, you know, could do that. And they were good in China for the entirety of 2019 Contenders. I mean, they won Contenders Season 1 in China. They won Contenders Season 2 in China. But they didn't perform very well when it came to the big tournaments, the big international tournaments. They did not look very good in those. So it's it's what you kind of have to look at, but I don't expect much to come out of them. HSL, I'd expect much of the same. I don't expect a lot from them either. Maybe a player or two ends up moving to the Overwatch League to a team like Paris, but other than that, I don't really expect a lot from them. I think a lot of the good EU players right now aren't playing in EU. I think a lot of the good EU players are playing in NA. I don't think they're playing in EU. So that is all the teams that made the Gauntlet. And of course, there's some other teams to look at. Teams that didn't make the Gauntlet. I don't expect much from your minor regions like Pacific or Australia or South America, Australia and South America didn't even make the Gauntlet because they didn't perform super well. I mean, maybe a team like Order or Sydney Drop Bears has some players that are signed to the Overwatch League, but I wouldn't expect much in that regard. And then when it comes to South America, I mean, we've only seen, I think, Alemong is the only South American player ever signed to the Overwatch League. So like maybe players from low key get added. There's a lot of Brazilian players in the South American region, so that's always possible, but I don't expect much from South America in the Overwatch League. South American players haven't been the best players historically. It hasn't been the best region historically. It's been one of the weaker ones. So that's why I wouldn't expect much from Australia or South America. The other regions is, of course, where I would look. China, another one that's a little weird, though, because how much can you really expect Chinese players to end up on a team that isn't a Chinese team like Chengdu, when Chengdu already has a pretty much full roster of players? You don't really expect, at least I don't really expect, much to come out of Chinese contenders. So the regions I think you need to look at more are Pacific, mainly for Talon, but some of these other teams as well have some Korean players. But once again, I don't expect the Pacific region to produce a ton of players. They could produce some, but I don't expect them to produce many. But there's always a chance they could produce a few. NA, Korea, and EU are the main ones that I think will produce Overwatch League players. And even still, EU I don't think will produce a ton, but I think there's a decent amount that we could see come out of the regions that I mentioned. I mentioned, of course, before Future University is a team from Korea to look at. In NA, I think you could look at any real team. Sky Foxes is a team who could have some players that move up. They have Who Are You, who's on loan right now. I believe he's been too young to play forever, pretty much. But he's now 18, and he's definitely a player that could make his way up. He's has history of Lunatic High, so Seoul Dynasty could bring him up. He won Apex Season 2 and Apex Season 3 with Lunatic High back in 2017, so he's a player that definitely could make his way up. He was just recently playing on Sky Foxes. There's a lot of players I think you should be on the lookout for. Contenders is an interesting scene. Of course, the World Cup is still coming up, and that's a scene to look at. A lot of players coming out of there as well, potentially. So it's interesting to look at. There's always players that people could go after. You have Uprising Academy, which has a lot of players on it from a lot of different regions in the world. So they're definitely a region to look at to potentially see players from all over the world end up on Boston Uprising, because that's just kind of what they do. And they actually had a pretty good run. So there'll be a lot to watch here. It's going to be an interesting region to watch. NA, you've like Revival, who has a lot of players who are pretty good, and they just redid their roster and added Fran and why can't I think of her name? Aspen. They added them to. So there's a lot of teams to look at. A lot of academy teams, of course, connected to NA. So definitely a lot to look at. Revival did not play very well. They got 8th, so they're not a team that did particularly well, but they're a team definitely that could improve and get a lot better because they have shown that they can do that. That's really all I have for you. The Contenders scene is something definitely to watch. there's always a possibility that players are signed from these various regions. But at the end of the day, I would say Korea is still going to be your dominant region where most of the players come from. NA is going to be another one that's going to have a lot of players. So that's really all there is to know about the way I see the stuff going on with Contenders. There's a lot of really good Contenders players, and I would expect a lot of them to end up in the Overwatch League. I would expect almost, a player from each of the, well, not each of the teams. A lot of the teams from the Gauntlet, I think, will have players that end up on the Overwatch League stage, but we will just have to watch and see what happens from here on out. If you have a player that you think will end up in the Overwatch League, I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to know who you think will be an Overwatch League caliber player down in the comments down below. But that's all I have for you today. So thank you for watching. I'll see you all next time. And bye-bye.